Jim Moran, Director of Outreach at the American Antiquarian Society, and I want to talk a little bit about how to use images with students in classrooms. The first thing we want to do with historic images is to have students really carefully look at the image. And this is kind of a tricky thing to do because we're not used to looking carefully at anything. So we really want to slow them down and to try to get them just to see every single aspect of the image itself. We particularly want them to be looking without trying to interpret at this point, just to gather the details of what's in the image. There are some techniques to do that might be helpful. One thing is to just have them list, to create an inventory of everything they see, to list everything they see. In some cases, you might want to create a columned worksheet where they have a listing of everything that they see and a listing of what the people are doing. And again, just trying to get them to gather information about the image. Another technique that is kind of an interesting one is to have them actually draw the image. When you draw something, you have to really examine it in order to see all of the details. In some cases, this could be part of a multi-curriculum activity with an art class. But in our case, for examining historic images, we don't really care about the artistic representation that our students are creating. We're just trying to get them to examine it very closely. With complicated images and large images, you may want to break the images into sections, and likewise break your class into smaller sections and have each section of the class examine one section and then report back to the larger class so that they're seeing just their section and then comparing notes with students on all of the other sections. Once they've carefully examined the image, the second thing we want them to do is to describe what's happening in the image. We want them to tell the story that the image is telling, if they can. And in this case, they want to then start to examine the actions of the people that are in the image. We also want to make sure that if they're clear on if there are words in the image, what those words are, who's saying them, and what those words mean if they're there. Then we want to have them start to do some higher level thinking about this image. We want them to start analyzing the composition of the image. We want them to look at the use of lines, the use of color. We want them to examine if there are any symbols in the image and what those symbols might represent. We want them to start then to bring in other information outside of the image that might help them understand what is going on in the image as well. And in this context, we also want them to start to determine what emotions are being conveyed by the image. In this case, they can start with what the image makes, how it makes them feel. But we also want them to be cognizant of not only the emotions that the image creates in them, but what is the artist's intention? What were the emotions the artist is trying to convey? There are really two kinds of emotions that play in any work of art. The ones that the artist or the creator has or is trying to convey, and those in the viewer. And those two kinds of emotions need to be understood for us to truly have visual literacy. Then we also want to clearly determine who created the image and why the image was created. In this context, we also want to examine things like evidence of worldview, bias, and opinion. So we want our students to go from just examining the image to starting to critically think about the image and to interrogate the image. They almost want to become detectives, and the image is starting to become a primary source that needs to be interrogated like a suspect in a murder case. From a historical perspective, we want to examine images for their accuracy, how the image was received in its day, and that image's impact over time. Essentially, how important the image is. Many images, like Boston like Paul Revere's image of the Boston Massacre, have had a tremendous influence on American history. We can see its echoes in the Declaration of Independence, in the U.S. Constitution, and in other images that appear regarding other conflicts in U.S. history over time. On this website is a worksheet that you can download and use with your students. It emulates the process that I just described for you. We also have 2 short videos in which I model this process to interpret primary sources around the Boston Massacre.